I'll start now, guys. So just one sec. So welcome to our first webinar with Dwyer about how to prepare for a UX job interview. My name is Valentina, and I'm a founder and one of the mentors in UX3 mentorship program. I see a lot of familiar faces there. Sorry, still coming here. But there are some people that might not know what UX3 mentorship program is. So I'm just gonna walk you through a few slides here. So I started this mentorship program 9 months ago, and my idea was to pair grads in UX with an experienced mentor who is sharing similar career path in order to develop their professional skills. My main goal was basically to enable all UX grads to bridge the gap between education and workplace. Some of the benefits for mentees here, after finishing up with the program, all mentees will get extra project that they can post in their portfolio, plus we'll give them the certificate of completion. After they submit their case study, they will have one-on-one mentoring sessions with their mentor for a minimum of 8 hours during the entire program. Because of this, I think also they will be one step closer to being job ready, because they will get tips and they will learn a lot from their mentors, who will show them a lot about how working and in UX actually looks like. And also one of the most important thing is networking. I think nowadays our mentees, they have regular catch-ups and everything, and you're going to meet a lot of nice people and designers here in our community. So just to cover this with statistics. So last year, these are statistics from our round in last year. All of our mentees reported improvement in their research, prototyping, and design skills. 83% of our mentees said that they improved their presentation skills, and overall their general confidence in UX improved for all mentees after finishing up with the UX3 mentorship program. So just a few words about our mentors. All of our mentors are basically carefully selected and highly experienced UX professionals with at least 3 years of experience in the field. All of them are in senior UX positions, UX leads, managers, and directors. Some of the benefits for mentors are basically knowledge. One of the first ones, because while working with your mentee, you're going to share your knowledge, your learnings, your experiences, and everything, and probably you're going to kind of touch base even the kind of aspects that you haven't worked on before. We organize mentor meetups every few weeks, and now we're going to start also doing those with entire group in person. Recognition, employers seem to really appreciate the initiative when somebody kind of starts mentoring in UX, and also a lot of recruiters and hiring managers, and again, networking, very important. So all of our mentors said that they improved their leadership and their communication skills after finishing up with the program, and 42% of our mentors said that they got promoted after mentoring with us. So that's it from my side. I'll stop sharing now, and I'll give the microphone and to Phil, who is my colleague in AIB. He's gonna present himself, so I'm just gonna, yeah. That's perfect.
Now let me see if I can get Zoom working for me. That would be a really good idea. There we go. Okay, thanks for coming along and listening to me waffle on for a little bit of while around recruitment and everything. I know people trying to get into this career path, it can be quite tricky, especially if you're making a sideways move. So I'm just going to go through a few things that I've done and what I've seen as a hiring manager. So my name's Philip. I'm the experience design manager in AAB. So currently I'm looking at design ops for all the digital channels in AAB. I've been in AAB for almost 15 years now. I've been working in UX for the past 10 years, probably at this stage. Within AAB, I've worked on a number of different channels. So from the mobile banking app, which hopefully somebody out there is familiar with and has used at some point, to internet banking, to group websites, to everything like that. So I've had a pretty long career doing design inside the bank. Currently, I've hired most of the people, bar I think Val. I don't think I actually hired you. I found you randomly in the bank, but I've hired pretty much everyone else in the bank that does design. So currently we're at 25 people. So started off with as a designer of myself, and we're at 25 people as per today in digital UX and design. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be up to around 30 people. So we do hire a lot. We also have a lot of grads. I do like grads. I do like to hire grads. I think grads bring a lot to the table. They have new ideas, fresh ideas, and they're also in touch with a lot of kind of things that I'm not as familiar with, being an old fogey in this game. So I get people with nice new ideas to kind of come in and help spruce up the place a little bit. So I'm going to start off a little bit about kind of the jobs to go for. I see a lot of jobs. I look at a lot of jobs that are out there, and there's a lot of iffy titles. So probably a kind of key things to look for, especially if you're coming in as a kind of a newbie, is job titles that are like this: experience designer, product designer, UX product designer, UI designer, interaction designer, service designer. They're kind of the key kind of phrases and jobs you probably want to look for. One to definitely think about and maybe not pay too much attention with something that has UX/UI designer. A lot of those kind of jobs have an idea that they're focusing on a kind of a unicorn, somebody that can do UI, UX, that you probably can do some sort of coding. You can probably do a load. That's all rubbish. You know, that's somebody that's trying to hire one person to do 3-4 jobs. And it's also somebody who doesn't really understand what a UI designer is and what a UX designer is, and that they are different, but they're in the same umbrella, but they are different jobs. So try and look at something that kind of is more focused. Sometimes the grad kind of positions might come up that would be maybe both UX and UI, but they should kind of clearly differentiate them, that you are floating between these two roles to help you pick a path that you might want to go down in the future. But make sure you read the job ad and the job application and understand that's kind of what they're talking about, that they're not hoping that you're going to be some sort of amazing UI/UX designer. They're just not. There's no such thing. And anyone who says there is a liar. So the first thing probably to get ready is your CV. CV in theory can seem very simple, but it can be a little bit tricky. So the entirety of the CV is to kind of keep it short and to the point. So try and think about the person who's doing the recruiting, like me. So I have a day-to-day job. I manage a team of 25 people. I look after lots of projects at the time. So I have to go through CVs on downtime, in spare time, maybe after work, or when I not doing anything else. So I need to get through them kind of quickly. So for a last job posting I had up just in November, I had 52 applications. So I had to read all those CVs, read all those portfolios, and see who was there and who's not. And some of the CVs were super long, like they're 4 or 5 pages long. And that's just way too much. Like I'm just going to be skim reading them. So I want to have a CV that's kind of pretty short and to the point, that I can see basically your key things at the very beginning. So these are kind of the key things here. So showing your most recent experience and working back. So where are you now? What have you been doing currently in, or what are you working at the minute? Highlight the experience that relates to job. I know if you're applying for a lot of jobs, the kind of idea is to kind of just have a CV and hit a load of different jobs. But sometimes you miss the nuances that are in each of the individual job postings, and they might be looking for something very specific. So it is important that you kind of maybe edit some of your experience to the job that you're applying for. It just makes it more personal and connects more with that job. And especially if I'm reading down, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I was actually looking for, and you have that experience. So it's important to you don't have to edit everything, but there might be a few things you might want to change in each CV you put out. Outline your skills. So that's actually really, really important. What skills do you have? Sometimes people leave that out altogether, or they hide it in a kind of a box or in a story. Try and break it down also into your technical and your kind of design skills. So some people might have HTML, CSS coding skills. Awesome, put that in. You might have people management skills. One of the last designers I hired was a nurse. She came from a nursing background, but she talked about some of her skills were nursing, which are directly, even though you mightn't think about it, are directly applicable to user experience, because you're finding out what your customer wants, you find out what your patient wants, you're dealing with a kind of a regulatory environment for banking, you're dealing with a hospital. So they are actually fairly transferable. So just highlight those key skills that you might have. Mirror the language. So sometimes it's good to kind of maybe read the application to understand the language of the people you're using for. So your title might say in a previous role, design manager, for example, but they use design lead. So just switch the manager to lead. That's all you have to do. It just mirrors it a lot easier for you. And for the recruiter, they can match it up a lot easier. Highlight any awards in education. So just like this, the UX3, if you complete it and get your certificate, absolutely highlight those kind of things. They kind of show more about you. And also you might have awards and recognition from things that you have nothing to do with design. But again, it helps the person see who you are. And that's kind of what my last point is around a person. So when somebody's looking at these CVs, they want to see you on the team. They want to see how you want to picture you on the team, working with everyone else. So if I'm looking for somebody, I want them to jump out and kind of, oh yeah, that's actually something connected with this other person. Cool. They will. It just helps to round out that recruitment and make it easier for somebody to pick you out of the pile. Portfolio. So this is a really interesting one, and it's probably more interesting than the CV, because a CV, there's a lot of them can be boilerplated and can be the same thing over and over again, especially if you haven't got a lot of experience. So effectively, you're a grad, you probably have maybe one role beforehand, and maybe some other, you worked in Centre or Spar or whatever. The portfolio is where you can stand out. And the key phrase here is to tell a story in your portfolio. And what I mean by this is having your examples, but if you look at the image, it says beginning and end. So this is the star. When I say think star, that's really important. So it's the situation, the task, the action, the result. So when you're going down through your portfolio and your examples or case studies, which is also called, you want to describe the situation you're trying to do for, the tasks that you personally did, the actions that resulted from those tasks, and the result at the end from your project. Some people just put in images, and I know some colleges tell you to just put in images or keep it as literal light as possible. That's dangerous, because if somebody just gets images, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you're trying to say, what you've done, or what you're going to do here. So there has to be some story and some context to it. So definitely think of it as a story. There is a beginning, middle, and end. And you want to write them out like that. Now, I don't mean for you to write, a 10-page essay either, but having the key points, little short paragraphs attached and going down, and put your headings on each one of them. That will really, really help somebody to scan through them and see your thought process, because that's one of the key things around the portfolio, is to see your thought process and how you move through each of the steps. Especially if you're coming from a more academic background, is to make sure you understand the steps and you're following them through and you have an example for them. And it's about telling your story. Also, having examples that kind of cover both UX and UI. If you don't know what field you're most interested in, and I would suggest that most people who are just coming into this world probably don't, unless they have a very strong predisposition to something. Have a UX and a UI example, and then maybe have a third one that's probably more your favorites, maybe 2 UX, 1 UI, whatever. Again, it's just around showing that you can do both jobs, that you have an understanding of both sides. Some people who are so UX practitioners or so UI practitioners often miss the connection between the two. To be a good UX person, you must understand how, when you finish all your research, do your wireframes, do your prototypes, how is that going to affect into the code base and the UI person that's going to have to design everything up for you? Or if you're a UI person, doing designs without having an understanding of how it affects the user is also not very good. So you want to be able to show yourself that you have that connection between the two. So just make sure that your portfolio has that kind of structure. has those examples, has some nice images, doesn't have to be loads of images. You also don't need to put your portfolio on a website. Now, there is plenty of websites out there that will, you know, automatically generate portfolios for you, or, you know, you can use Behance or anything like that. That's fine, but you can also just put them on a PowerPoint, have it as a PDF and send it in. You don't have to break the bank buying, you know, licenses for these websites, which once you get your job, you don't need them anymore. So a PDF is just as good in a PowerPoint. So the interview. Hopefully, once that's all in, you've got called for your interview. So relax going into the interview. It's not a test. It's not there to catch you out. Be prepared. That's the key things here. So an interview can follow. There's two general types of interviews. Your standard interview, you probably have done some of them before, which is just kind of more about kind of going in, talking to you, and really, Joe, maybe you have to bring your portfolio and things like that to talk to. And then there's competency-based interviews, which what I do. And a competency-based interview sounds strange and scary. It's not. A competency-based interview is basically 5 competencies usually. Let's say customer focused, people management, things like that. They'd be the titles. And the questions would usually follow a line of, tell me about a time you did X. So the entire point of that is that you tell your story in the interview. So tell me about a time you had to do some customer research for a problem, and how did you incorporate that customer research into your final solution? That'd be like a question. And it's just about you picking one of your examples that you've done and talking through it. You're still going to use something similar like that in a standard interview as well. So it's good to have that thought process in mind. That STAR model I spoke about earlier is directly applicable to competency-based interviews. That is how you structure any competency-based answer that you do. You always have it a situation, task, action, result. You can write out your examples. A lot of people come into interviews and they're not prepared. They don't have examples thought out. So there's a lot of, give me a minute, let me think about something. Have some examples pre-done, have them thought out, have them written out. You can have, especially if you're on Zoom or any of the other video chats, you can have them in front of you, but you can also go into an interview with them. Like, nobody's going to penalize you for having your notes. It's not a test of your memory. Nobody wants to test your memory. We want to get the best out of you. So if that's something you have to bring with you to help you remember, that's okay. What I do recommend is don't have a booklet with you that you are going through and spending 10 minutes trying to find your answer. Also, don't have it too detailed. If you have it written out, a really danger I see all the time is somebody who has them written out like that, they can't adapt the answer to the question they've been asked. So they just tend to read what's in front of them. And that's never a good thing. And look, relax as well. Interviewers are, if they ask you follow-on questions, are not trying to catch you out. What we're trying to do is get the best out of you. You either haven't answered the question exactly right, so listen to the follow-on question. It's really important to listen to that follow-on question. Or you actually have answered the question and you just want to hear more about what you're talking about. That's really it. So there's nobody there trying to catch you out. If you feel somebody is trying to catch you out, that's not the job for you, because obviously that person is not a very nice person and they're just being mean. So, you know, it's no loss to you if they are trying to do something like that. So what I'm actually going to say just before that, actually, competency-based interviews as well are actually done on points. You might notice they won't tell you this. Usually there's 5 competencies. There's usually 5 points per competency for a total of 25 points. You are looking to aim to get 4 points out of each competency. So to get 4 points in a competency, you have to answer the STAR model like pretty much exactly and hit it exactly on the button. To get 5 points, it means you have to have multiple examples. So you want to have 2 examples or more. If the interview stops you and says, no, we're cool, that means you're grand, you've answered the question, you can move on. You don't need to keep going on with your examples. So just something to bear in mind, most interviews are based on points. There is a point system. And the reason why that is the case is obviously that we're interviewing 8, 9, 10 people. We have to have some way to kind of help us manage and prioritize the people in that list. And then it kind of comes down to maybe the top 2 or 3 people. Then there's a discussion about, you know, who or what happens. But you want to be getting as many points that you get. It mightn't be an official point, so, but every interview has some way of measuring somebody and putting points together. So just bear that in mind. If you follow STAR and you have your examples pre-done and you have, Joe, thought these out, you will do well. You should be aiming like minimum 3, but 3 15s, 3 points in each of the 5 questions, but when it comes to 15, which is fairly average score, you want to be hitting 18 or more. So just when you're doing your maths in your head, when you think it out, you're looking for 18 or more. We also do design related questions, and these will appear often in the standard kind of interviews as well. So we kind of have a little design section as well that we try and do in our interview process. So normal questions that I kind of ask would be like this. So define the design. What's your favorite project and why? What's your favorite app and why? Who do you follow and read? Now, the who do you follow and read is one of my favorite questions. It really kind of opens up people and lets me know what they're doing. The answer is Norman Nielsen. That's a perfect answer, or anyone else that you've looked at or read. The amount of people who can't answer that question is actually shocking, especially when they're trying to get into a design business and they're coming from college. Like design of everyday things, any books, anything like that you've read or seen, you know, people you've followed, just name them. Just have that prepared. You can pre-do that ahead of time. You can pattern them into your other answers as well, which is fine. So it shows that you're looking outside the job and you're reading around the subject as well. What's your favorite app and why is a great question. I also use website depending on what I'm looking for, but it's to kind of show that you have appreciation of something and you can articulate why you like something. And the reason for that is if you're bringing in design ideas into the job, how are you bringing them in? What are you looking at? How are you seeing the things around you to bring these ideas in? And why is it a good idea to bring them in as well? What's your favorite project is just to get a little bit more out of people. It's to open you up, and often that question is a great question because people are very proud of their favorite project and they will tend to open up as to why. So sometimes if they're a little bit closed in the other questions, it can be a great way for you to highlight something that you were really proud of and why you were really proud of and what brought delight to you about it. And define design, it's a simple question, but also lots of people get it wrong. And it's not necessarily there's a wrong answer, but there can be, particularly if somebody's moving from graphic design into user experience design or UI design, their understanding of design and visual design are kind of different. So it's important just to kind of get an understanding of what the person is like. So another thing we also do is a design test, and I know a lot of places do this as well. Again, this is not a scary thing. We don't usually do it on the remote interviews because it's a little harder to do, but definitely when we're back in the office and doing in-person interviews, we will be doing this again. So the reason we do this is really to get your presentation and skills and see what they're like and how do you define something and how do you bring us in this story. So as you can kind of see, there's a running theme throughout this, which is storytelling. It's so important in the design world. You actually don't always appreciate it. And it's not something that a lot of people talk to you about, but to bring people into design, to bring them to understand why customers don't like something or customer issues, or to bring people on the idea of why we improve some UI feature, you have to tell a story and you have to engage people in this. So it's a very, very important thing to be able to do. Usually in this, there's no wrong answer. It's not trying to find a right or wrong answer here. It's about testing your reasoning and your presentation skills. So normally what we'll do is we'll have a question like this: how did you get here today? That's the question. We'll give you some whiteboard markers and draw out the answer and talk us through it. So we've had people who have gone about their entire life story, how they became a designer, and talked all the way to that, and it's great. And we've had people who talk about get up in the morning, go Google mapping where to go for the interview, etc. Perfectly fine too. I've had one person who literally turned their back to me went to the bottom corner of the whiteboard, wrote out a bunch of things and went, that's it. And I couldn't even read it. So that's what not to do. What to do is just draw it nice. It can be stick figures. It's not an art test either. A lot of people also get freaked out because they think it's an art test. It's not. Boxes, little people, arrows, just pretty much what you see on the screen there. Perfect. That's what we're looking for. You'll get lots of different ones like what you call it, Joe, how would you design a TV? There's all these kind of same questions. Again, we don't want you to know about the nuance of a TV. We just want you to, how would you go about thinking about it in the abstract idea, and talk us through how your thought process on it. So at the end of the interview, I do encourage people to ask questions, and I do encourage people throughout the entire interview to ask questions at any point in time. It's really important, firstly, for you to understand where you're going to go and work. It should be also, the interview should be used by you to figure out, do you want to work here at all? Is this something for you? Because there's nothing worse than joining the company and it not being right for you. It could be that it's not hitting the kind of type of work you're looking to do, or it's, it's not the situation. We do hybrid working, but other companies might need you to go into the office all the time, and that mightn't be suitable for you. So it's good to ask these questions. Two of the best questions I've heard, and I always enjoy hearing them, is why do you like working here? So asking me, why do I like working there? So as I said, I've been in AAB 14 years. So I obviously like something about it. So it is good to kind of hear that, why that person likes to work there. And then what's the day-to-day like? That's a really important question, I think, that people should ask, and they kind of don't ask all the time. It's important that the person describes your day-to-day work and how you go about it. So, you have an idea then of the job you're going to get into, and are you going to get something out of it? It also shows that you're engaged. It shows me that, you're interested in working here, and you're interested in the role and the job, and you have kind of good questions to ask, which again is part of the design process. So we're coming to the end. That's pretty much usually the interview section for us done. A lot of other companies might do a few other things where they might have multiple interviews. It's the same thing over and over again. There's no extra stuff that's coming out of another fourth and fifth interview as from the first interview. It's kind of like a round of good user testing or surveys. Often when you do a survey, for example, within the first hour, pretty much the numbers, the percentages pretty much stay the same, and it doesn't change. And the same comes from these interviews. Being interviewed by 10 people is the same as being interviewed by one, and it all touches on the same points. There's no guarantee you will be hired if you follow those steps, but you will be in a much better position to get hired, because, as I said, it comes down to points, and sometimes it can only be a point or two in the difference. So the last round of interviews I did, they were internal, and they were 4 people were in the top group, and there was only a point between each one, and there was only 2 jobs. So it was that close. It was super close, but that's just what it came down to, and that's what happens sometimes. You might have a great interview, but the other person just has that little bit more and gets another point over you, and that's unfortunately what happens sometimes. But always get feedback. Ask to get feedback if you can. Most people will give you feedback if you ask, but at least ask for the feedback. You can only get it, and then you can improve on that. They will talk you through probably what that last job, why you didn't get that point. So make sure you get it, and it will make you better for the next job interview. You can improve on those things. So that's kind of it in a whistle-stop tour. Hopefully I did answer some questions that you had in your head, but I'm absolutely happy to take any and all questions from anyone now.
Anyone has any questions, guys, for Phil?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Hi. I'm a level 9 student at TU Dublin. And you mentioned at your introduction that starting off in the industry can be difficult if you're making a lateral move. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what's tricky about a lateral move in a situation like this.
It can be So there's probably two things around that. It's sometimes the person who's moving laterally can have an idea of what they're moving into that's not what they actually are moving into. So for example, a graphic designer who's moving into, there's a lot of graphic designers who move into UX and UI. And they've come from that years of doing graphic design in particular. But it's a very different world. It has the same title as in design in it, and it has visuals, but that's probably where most of it ends. They just don't have the example. So we actually just hired a 15-year experienced graphic designer to go into doing UI work. And as we went through the kind of interview process with her, she had already appreciation of what UI was. She had some design work that she did do. Her main job was a graphic designer, but she had done some UI work as well. But the key things here is that UI and graphics are very, very different. So for example, UI is around a lot of throwaway screens, a lot of relatively low fidelity versus graphic design. And also, a lot of your design work mightn't be used. And that can be quite hard for a lot of graphic designers to understand. They struggle with the idea of, they are very passionate about the design and the visual imagery they produce and the graphics they produce. And they can be quite precious around that. But in UI, that's irrelevant because it's down to A, the code base, and B, the customer research that went to the start. A lot of it's been driven by a design system of some shape or form. And other people, then you see a lot of product people who want to move into user experience because they feel that they've managed products. They have an idea of what the customer wants, but they actually haven't got the real depth in the research part that struggles. So they have met a customer and they have talked to customers, but they actually haven't done that real step-by-step, like double diamond kind of work around research. And that's where they also struggle. So there's a glut of people who are moving into this role, but the roles are also starting to understand what they require. So about 5 to 6 years ago, a lot of people who are hiring for these type of jobs didn't know actually what they were hiring for. So that's what I leaned towards at the start around the UX/UI kind of job postings. I was actually at one talk and there was a recruiter at the talk and she put her hands up and pretty much asked me how to talk around a job posting for a person like that. And I was like, "Are you a recruiter?" And she's like, "Yes," because she was taking notes. She wanted me to fill out basically the job ad for her, which is fine. But I just thought it was quite interesting at that time. So they were taking a lot of people on, and a lot of more people have now moved because there's kind of there's not a lot of particularly graphic design work after a certain point. And there's a lot more companies in Ireland, especially digital companies, who are hiring people in like UX and UI designers. So people are moving in there, but they just don't have the skill sets and the experience to take on a lot of these jobs. So things like this UX3 and any of these other mentorship programs really do help you just develop your skills, but also develop the language that you need to say. So as I said, around the double diamond, around user testing, user interviews, prototyping, work, any of those kind of key phrases you're looking for, and to understand the difference between also UX and UI. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but hopefully I did hit on some of your questions.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Hey, Philip.
Hey.
Dean here. I'm in Matt's course as well.
Awesome.
My undergrad is in mobile application development and networking, from the coding side.
Yeah.
And as we kind of progressed through that, as we were kind of doing talks like this, it was very clear that skill set trumps everything. You mentioned before that some of your questions would kind of find out if someone would integrate with a team. I know this is all very subjective, but if you had someone interviewing who was maybe a 7 out of 10 portfolio wise, but a 10 out of 10 in terms of like fitting with the team, versus the opposite, a 10 out of 10 portfolio, but maybe a 7 out of 10 in team fit, where do you think like your priorities lie? Is it purely in portfolio and skill set, or do you think someone who fits in with the team is as important?
Personally, it's fitting in with the team is as important. it's a really important, so in the term, there's things called like brilliant jerks, which sounds like a mean term, but it's, especially in the developer world, you can meet a lot of people like that who are incredibly talented people, like they're brilliant developers and they can code things to their heart's content, but they don't really fit in with a team. And that can be okay in development land, when it can be a quite siloed and quite individualistic role. But in design, it tends to be the opposite. Now, design and development are actually kind of mirrors of each other. They tend to be very similar things. We just use different tools from developers. But one of the key differences between designers and developers is the social aspect. Stakeholders are really important here. So when you kick off a project, you'll usually be working with a stakeholder, which would be, let's say, a product person or a compliance or legal or something like that. And you'd also be working in usually a multidisciplinary team, which would be a developer, a business analyst, a quality assurance person, and some developers. So being able to play nice in the sandpit is quite important. So that's where the social aspect and bringing all those people along in the design, in the research, including them in and all that kind of stuff. So social is quite important. And also then inside the design community, you'll often have critiques. You'll often have workshops and everything else together. You have to be able to play quite well in those kind of groups. So being social is important. And Val touched on networking. So networking is super important. And it's super important no matter, even when you get the job, it is massively important to make sure you network inside your company and with people inside that to help you move the designs and move yourself along, importantly, beforehand, but also networking beforehand, just about kind of getting to know people and, again, talking to people and coming to things like this, going to like the, using the Meetup app and all that kind of thing, going to those kind of meetups and networking with people like that. Is it to kind of maybe expand your question a little bit, if it was like, portfolio was 10 and the person was 10 and the portfolio was 5 and vice versa, would you kind of go with that? Then it's probably a little bit more, if you had to fill in the bottom, you had normally for every job, you want to interview 4 people per position to give yourself a bit of choice and options to pick somebody. So if you had 3 people that you definitely were, and that other person was coming up the end, you probably fill it out at the end just to get that last, you take a punt is kind of how we describe it. Mm-hmm. If we had 2 positions probably going, and we had a fairly full team and it was fairly standard, and this person was as an outlier, you might take the punt on hiring them. It's a risk because it might work out and mightn't, but if it does work out, it actually can be very rewarding. So we do take a risk, and I have taken risks in people, and I have been super rewarded by taking those risks on people. I've had some amazing people come through by doing this, taking that risk. But that's really to get you to interview. But in the interview, again, the points is really what trumps it. You only might come to it if the 2 people were coming at the same points level, then you might think about the overall team fit then. But once it gets into the interview, it is that points level at that interview stage. That makes sense, Dean?
Thanks very much.
No problem. See, Anna has her hand up.
Yes, like I always get nervous because I don't know when to talk and I don't want to interrupt anybody.
That's okay. Don't worry.
I have like 2 questions. Now you're talking about the points. I am in the process for 1 interview and I have like 5 interviews at this stage. And in one of them, that was the whiteboard challenge. I was all over the place. Like, I have to say, like, when I see the time, I'm like, oh, okay. So to summarize, I lost track of the time. I will do this better. So I was trying to tell, like, I am aware. I did tell them, like, in the beginning that it was my first whiteboard challenge.
That's okay,
Based on the point system that you mentioned, if some person, like, really struggle in one of the interviews and you think is like nervous or related to something like that, would you consider that person, or would you just go for someone that kind of like have a more like a reliable level of points in the different parts?
Yeah, no, like, again, nervousness people get nervous doing interviews, and people do tend to empathize. So a key part of being a designer and also being a design manager is empathy. So if they're not being very empathetic to you, that's a kind of a worrying sign about the people you're going to work with, because it is a core fundamental point of being a UX designer. Now, if the entirety of the interview still, even with the empathy, even with kind of relax, Joe, take a drink, and Joe, do you want 5 minutes, blah, blah, blah. If it still can't move forward, unfortunately, it's still, Joe, it is what it is. Joe, you haven't answered the question. You haven't gone through the steps. At the end of the day, the people who are interviewing you can only give you the job or give you, Joe, consider you if you answer the question and go through, no matter how empathetic they can be. So just because you're nervous, if you still answer the question and you're nervous, nobody's going to hold that against you, because at the end of the day, the most brilliant person in the world and super confident person in the world will still stumble at an interview, because they are a horrible experience for anyone to go through. And unlike most people understand that, and anyone who's had an interview themselves will kind of empathize with you, hopefully, as well. But if they don't, that says more about them than it would about you, in my personal opinion. So I personally have taken people on who've been super nervous. It's something that we can train. So when I left college, and even when I was in college, literally to do something like this, you could forget about it. There is no way you could drag me kicking and screaming to do this. I would have spoken like this with a page in front of my face. And that's what happens. You just have to kind of pull that band-aid off and just kind of get talking for people and build up your experience of that. So if you're in college, do that. If you can do a talk, if you're doing some sort of training or mentorship one, put your hand up and just put yourself out there. The more you do it, the easier this will become for you. And it is an important part of this. So the workshopping, and I encourage anyone who works for me I kind of push them out to kind of make sure they do these talks. It's very, very important to build up that confidence, to be able to manage people, be able to manage work, just for you to grow, regardless of the interview, just for you to grow into this role. It is a very important part. It is about your story. I can't underline that enough. Design is about telling a story. It's about bringing people into that story and bringing them along that adventure, and you have to convince people to do that. So talking is important.
Okay, and my second question, yes, like I kind of like got like an idea. And my second question is about the soft skills. So I transitioned to UX from special education, and same as you mentioned, like the example of this nurse, I can see how there are like so many transferable skills. But I had like a few like CV reviews, and the feedback I was getting at the beginning is like, well, everyone is empathetic and everyone has like good communication skills. And even if you don't have, like, you will put in your CV because you're not gonna say like something wrong about it. Like, like I'm selfish, I am lazy. No, like everyone is super empathetic, like have great communication, is a team worker, and is a hard worker. So what will be your approach about soft skills? What would you consider for a person that is like switching careers to include, and what will you avoid that will be like really like, wow, like this is just filling another column or something like that?
So skill wise, it would be showing skill, Joe. So there's technical and personal skills. So technical skills would be around more around kind of the UI sort of stuff. So you're talking about skills around Sketch, InVision, Figma, those kind of things. If you have any coding, so I know Dean said he'd done, Joe, his undergrad was around that. So anything like that, even if it's only basic, Joe, pop it in. So HTML, CSS, Joe, Java, anything like those kind of coding skills as well. They're kind of your technical skills. Also, interviewing, have you done kind of any sort of things like that? Then your more, Joe, personal skills is around, Joe, people management, team management, if you've done anything like that. Joe, project management is really important. Again, it's a skill that a lot of people don't seem to think about when they do design. Have you got experience with agile project management? Got experience with Kanban? because you're going to be working on a project team.
Yeah.
That is where you're going to work. So putting those down. The classic ones, the old-fashioned ones, communicator and all that, the classic almost Americans, Stevie style things. Yeah, it is a filler. Like, I'm just not going to look at them. Like, they're cool, they're on the page and all that, but I would expect you to be a good communicator. I'd expect you to be empathetic. Those kind of things there. People fill them in, they put them in just kind of to fill it out. Yeah, I wouldn't. I go back to my point about cutting to the chase. People have time, they're looking for these skills, and you will see again a lot of boilerplate CVs. There is a load of boilerplate design CVs, which kind of have column coming down the side here is of some color, and then the center part here is off all your experience goes in here. Usually on the color side there is some kind of box with kind of sketch, and there's like 10 dots, and you just fill in the dots. So you say, okay, dot 9, and then Figma 8 dots, and etc. That's fine. That's what people expect, and that's what they're looking for, and they're really just scanning. Okay, you can do sketch, Figma, blah blah, grand, cool. Okay. Oh, you have agile, cool, awesome. That's what we're looking for too. And they just really want to scan that. They don't want it filled in with lots of other filler that they don't really care about, and it's kind of assumed that you can do that. You're a good worker, and etc. So yeah, I leave that out. Fill it up with kind of quality stuff that they're looking for.
Thank you.
No worries. David, I can see David has his hand up.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, Philip. Another question.
No bother.
Again, I'm coming to my masters with Dean and Matt.
Yeah.
So just in terms of, you mentioned earlier the scoring scenario for the interviews, but similarly, I was interested to know, do you have a rubric or a typical kind of a scoring sheet, or how do you grade the portfolio itself? What do you look for in terms of the competence?
Okay. So portfolio, as I said, is actually probably more important than the CV in a lot of ways. It's around kind of giving more of an insight of you and your process. It's probably, there's lots of boilerplate portfolios, and I would absolutely highly recommend looking at some of those boilerplate portfolios. It's because the reason why they're good is, they're the same as everyone else's, as in their layout, same, but there's also really good for the hiring person, because they know, okay, right, click here, I'm going to get my story, I'm going to perfect, and I can read it, and then I can go to the next case study you've done. Awesome, perfect, I can see what you're like. If they look for a portfolio and you don't give one, that's pretty much you're gone. You're just excluded. So make sure you have a portfolio of some description that you can provide. Behance and the other guys are fine, but make sure you lay it out in a portfolio setup, that it's not just a bunch of screens. Again, that'll be, you're gone. So the way we'd market is the story. So as I kind of said to you, it is the structure of your case studies and your examples. So it is that start, middle, and end. I basically want to be able to see what your problem that you're trying to solve. How did you come up with that problem, and what's the problem? What is your role? What did you do? So if you're doing the research, talk about that, Joe, let's say you're doing a college course project. Okay, cool. My role was to look after the research. And then what did you do? So the task you did, I did some customer interviews, I did usability testing, I did up the prototypes, blah, blah, blah. And keep it in, I did this. Some people, especially when they're in college projects, have a tendency to say, we did this. But that's the problem with we is, firstly, it's cool and you're sharing credit with the people, but they're not going for this job, so don't bother going we. I'm only interested in what you actually did. So, and when you say we, I'm not too sure if you did it or did somebody else do it, and you're just kind of putting it in there. So just keep it to I did this, I did that. And I know it's very on-Irish, and even regardless of that, it's very just, most people don't like saying I, but in this case, I is important. And then your conclusion, so even if the conclusion was that it didn't work, that's also good. So don't be afraid to put in something that didn't work, but also when you put in something that didn't work, why didn't it work, and what did you learn, and what would you do differently? That's really, really important as well. So it doesn't have to be a negative, because it can actually talk about, I learned from this. And that's really important, because a lot of the design stuff is around iteration and it's around failure. And failure is fine. Failure is good as long as you learn something from that failure and you go reincorporate into doing something else. So even in your interview, if you're asked about, let's say, what was your favorite project, you can still talk about something that is a failure as well. So as long as you learned from that failure. So that would be the kind of the key things around the portfolio. As I said, kind of keeping it to minimum 2 and 3 examples. That's really important. And that kind of there's a consistency of project of work throughout the two of them all. So you're following kind of the same methodology, same steps. You know, design is a very step-based process in some ways. You are following kind of, as I said before, the classic example of double diamonds. You know, you're kind of following something along those lines. So, you know, people talk about it in college that they did this. And I said, some colleges, I've reviewed portfolios and some colleges have said, Joe, cut out the story. Absolutely do not. The exact opposite is what you should be doing here. Keep the story in.
So for you, the story is more important than the visual then?
Yeah, unless you're doing a UI one, and the story is still very important on how you got to the visual, but obviously the visual then becomes, you know, as important because, you know, you're showing your UI skill set, you're showing your portfolio, why you did, you know, your fonts, your colors, your iconography, your palettes and all that kind of stuff as well. So the visual does become important there, but still the story is more important because I know how you then got to that visual. Without that, I don't know what's happened. Did you just go into Behance and copy and paste somebody's visual, or did you, Joe, do some research? Or that's what I really want to see. But what's your story?
Brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. Has anyone else got any questions? Excuse me if I'm talking very fast as well, because I do tend to talk fast. So you can tell me to slow down.
Maybe just one more question, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
You have mentioned that you go through all the CVs. It's a lot of work, 52 CVs.
Yeah.
Is there no such thing as the AI that looks through keywords on the CVs and filters through certain results, and then those certain results get to the hiring person?
Yeah, so there is some places that do that. Like, so Facebook has a kind of a UI thing. They do, let's say, a scan of your CV, and they'll pull out different things. It's really, a lot of companies just don't invest in that sort of level of detail for CVs. It's cheaper to just get people to do them. So you will have sometimes gatekeeper people in HR who will do that kind of, that's their kind of job. Effectively, they will do the filtering of the CVs. That doesn't really work if it's a more specialized role like a designer, or it's you know, let's say an engineer or somebody like that, because the person in HR doesn't really, unless they've specialized in that role, they just wouldn't know what to look for. So for me personally, I read them all. I might share with one of the other guys, and then we'll spend some time just kind of talking amongst ourselves. Now, like the other person who I'd normally do it with, she's plenty of experience as well recruiting people, so we kind of might split up the work. But no, the easiest thing for most places, unless you're in those really big upper tier groups, is just a person. But the same applies. So even if it's an AI going through it or a person going through it, they're still looking for the exact same keywords. It's just obviously a human being having to do it other than a computer. So it is important that you do have those clear keywords. And if you are going for a company that is in AI versus AI company, it's probably even more important that you structure your CV in a very set up way. Clear highlights, and also when you're doing your skills, because it will so like LinkedIn does this, for example. So if you have, Joe, that intro box at the top of your LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn will actually look through those Joe, lines that you put in there for keywords, and that will put you on the top of the searches for individual things. So that's why that box is super important. So you still need to fill it out in a structured way to get those keywords to get you into the right position. So, you know, as kind of Anna, we talked about, you know, communication, you know, again, they're not looking for those keywords. They are looking for sketch and vision, you know, those
wireframing, prototyping.
Yeah, prototyping, wireframing, user experience, user testing, all those kind of keywords. That's
so they're important still.
Oh yeah,
Doesn't matter if it's AI or person.
Yeah, it's more the poor schmuck like me that's going through it rather than the computer. So it's but we're both looking for the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
No bother. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go for it.
So say you're changing into the UX field and whatever. What is more like, I know if you have a good portfolio and a good CV, you'll get to an interview process, but if you don't really have like that much experience, what are the chances that they're more likely to bring you into an interview? You know, I'm just wondering that.
Okay. So that's probably back to making sure you pick the right role. So unfortunately, a lot of companies tend to be looking for people with some level of experience. And that's quite tricky for a lot of people trying to move into the role. So we hire a lot of grads, as I said, and we tend to hire a lot of people who necessarily not as experienced. It's just something we've always done, and it's something that's always worked for us. But I know a lot of people wouldn't even, look at a CV from something like that. And that becomes it's a catch-22 for a lot of people. You're kind of stuck. So unfortunately, probably the main way to go for it is looking for some of those grad roles, or looking for some of those companies who are either like us, who hire grads, or else companies who are probably smaller, more niche, probably can't afford to hire in a lot of designers. And you might end up working in, as I said, that kind of UX and UI kind of unicorning a little bit. But it's to build up that experience, that 1 or 2 years experience that you kind of need to have for a lot of these companies. It's annoying, especially if you've already come from a career, you've probably leveled yourself up and you're kind of almost dropping back down, to kind of get kind of back up to where you were just on this other path. A lot like Facebook or Google or like Workday, or Meta is Facebook nowadays, they changed the name. They're all looking for a very specific type of person. So they're usually looking for, even a designer level, just an ordinary designer would be somebody with 2 or 3 years experience. That's kind of where they're at. A lot Irish companies probably a little bit easier to kind of get into. They don't have that a stringent requirement, because even for a lot of Irish companies, this is a new field. So it's been around permanently in a lot of American companies for 20 plus years. But in Europe, it's only probably been in around the last 10 years. In Ireland, probably about the last 7 years. So a lot of Irish companies like Bank of Ireland, for example, they only have started to kind of create their kind of design space. So it's a little easier because they don't actually know what they want, and they're looking for junior people and senior people and mid-level people. I don't know if they're looking for them at the minute, but that's what they would be looking for. But it's probably just finding somewhere that you can build that little bit of experience to add on to your portfolio. Doing kind of freelance work is actually not a bad option to do as well. So putting yourself out there, doing some part-time freelance work on the side to kind of help build up that kind of, you've worked for this company, okay, cool, and you did 6 months with them, that's brilliant, and you have something to show for, and it kind of helps build that up. They'd be kind of things I'd be looking at. It's not easy. I can't unfortunately say it's easier, but freelance is definitely one thing I've seen a lot of people who have kind of changed career and have moved into, and they've built up maybe a year or two on freelance work. And then that allows them to have that kind of portfolio of experience, like job experience, to move into more of the actual design work. But it's a daunting thing to set up as a freelance person if you're not sure how to go about it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anna, answer your question?
I think it does. Yeah. And so would you say then, if you kind of go freelance and then you kind of know what kind of role you like particularly, you can just specialize in that and then go for those kind of roles that you see come up?
Absolutely. I always recommend, if you haven't worked in this field before, don't think about specializing unless you're completely predisposed to doing it. Like, you love research and analytics. Okay, grand. That's UX role for you. Explore the two sides. And kind of, that's the nice thing about freelancing, is you can do that a lot easier than, let's say, in the company, because a lot of companies want you to fill this niche, and that's all you're going to be doing. So, but then once you've kind of done a bit of experience with that, definitely, Joe, look to the role that you're probably, UX is probably the more abundant role. UI does require a certain, Joe, especially a lot of UI specialist roles require some coding level skills or some understanding of code. So, Joe, unless you have that, it's probably going to be more in the UX side of the sphere you're going to go on. I definitely would, if you're going to go into UX and or UI, expose yourself to code. I don't mean coding, but understand the technologies that go around it. It's really important that it helps grow you as a person as well. So remember, you're going to be on a development team of some description or form. You're not going to be just, Joe, sitting in the back and not talking to devs. You're going to have to understand how your designs affects the code base and understand how that connects in. So exposing yourself to that, it gives you another string to your bow. So really good advice I was given a long time ago was there's kind of 3 pillars. There's the business side, there's the tech side, and then there's the accounting money side. And you want to be able to kind of have some examples of all 3 of those. It just makes you a stronger candidate in the future, where, you know, the money side is that you're not going to blow all the money in the company and waste it. The business side, you understand the business and you understand the goals of the business, and then the technology that goes around making that happen. So a really important part of UX is this little thing where you have the business and you've got the user and you've got the money in the business in the center. So you kind of understand where the UX comes from. The business part is very important. So anything that you can kind of grow yourself in those kind of 3 pillars is super important as well. It just adds to you. It's kind of like, as I said, that nurse example. Again, is some of those extra skills that can kind of set you apart and might get you the job, even though you haven't got the whole package.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, no worries. Anyone else? We've been blabbering on for a while. Cool. Well, if you have any other questions, you can obviously send them to Val. I'll answer them. So if you think about something later on, just ping Val and I will send you back an answer. You don't have to think about everything.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything, Phil. Thank you all guys for your questions and for attendance tonight. I'm going to send the recordings later on, if that's okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely long weekend.
You too. Happy Paddy's Day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.